She laughed when you begged. She ignored your pain. She thought you were weak until you vanished. Now she can't sleep. She checks your profile at 2 a.m. She wonders who you're with. Why? Because you moved on without saying a word. Not with words, but with your energy. That's when her world starts to shake. You weren't supposed to heal without her. You weren't supposed to glow without her validation. But you did. And now, she feels everything she thought you never could. This moment, right now, is a turning point. Not just for her, but for you. You're not watching this because you're curious. You're watching this because part of you is changing. And I want you to know, I've been building the most brutally honest, life-altering resource ever created for men. The Stoic Relationship Blueprint ebook, it's dropping in just a few days. This is not just another book. It's the blueprint for reclaiming your emotional power, mastering your focus, and becoming untouchable to every woman who thought you'd never leave. Watch this video till the end and know exactly what to do and how she feels when she sees you've moved on. Number 1. She loses her emotional control. She thought she understood you, thought she had you figured out like every other man she emotionally disarmed before, needy, predictable, emotionally glued to her orbit. But what she didn't anticipate was your complete withdrawal from needing her presence, her validation, her energy. And when you took that step, not out of reaction but out of revelation, something irreversible began to take place in her psychology, because she didn't just lose a man, she lost the power to affect you. You see, for years she's been conditioned to believe that a man's worth is measured by how far he'll stretch himself to win her back after she disrespects him, ignores him, rejects him, or replaces him. But when you stopped trying, not to get her attention, but because your mind was done, her internal system glitched. She counted on your good morning texts. She counted on the "I'm thinking of you" messages after days of her coldness. She counted on the emotional safety net you never realized you were providing. She thought you were soft because you expressed love. But now, you're unavailable. You're quiet, not just online, but in spirit. And this time, there's no message coming, no gift arriving, no apology waiting. You've emotionally revoked access, and she doesn't have the password anymore. Think about that time she ghosted you for a week, then suddenly returned as if nothing happened. And you let her. That trained her to think that her inconsistencies would never cost her you. But now, you don't respond, you don't post breadcrumbs, you don't even react. And this isn't a strategy, it's who you've become. That's what terrifies her. You didn't pull away to make her chase. You've outgrown the very version of you she kept under her control. Ask yourself, how often have you given second, third, fifth chances to a woman who didn't even respect your first? How many times did you let her push emotional buttons because you feared losing her more than losing yourself? That's what she depended on, your emotional dependence. And now that it's severed, she's not angry, she's unstable. She finds herself looking for signs, reaching for emotional triggers that no longer respond. Like trying to light a fire in soaked wood, the spark just isn't there. And while she might look calm on the outside, posting, partying, living her best life, internally she's calculating. Why don't you respond anymore? Why doesn't she affect you anymore? Why does it feel like you've disappeared without ever physically leaving? You've shattered her illusion, not with arguments, not with drama, but by building a life that no longer requires her approval. She can't weaponize your emotions anymore because they're not on the battlefield. She can't provoke reactions because you've walked off the stage. And that's where real control begins, not in chasing closure, but in closing the door with such peace she never hears it slam. That's when she feels it, when your soul detaches, not out of spite, but out of wisdom. One Stoic once wrote, The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. And now, you've stopped valuing her attention, and for the first time in her life, she sees what it's like to no longer be the center of someone's peace. Because you took that peace back, and now she's forced to sit in the discomfort of no longer being able to disturb it. That's the real loss she feels. Number 2. Confusion replaces her confidence. She thought she could read you, decode you, navigate you like a familiar road, because before, your patterns were predictable. You'd message her after she pulled away, you'd seek closure after she created distance, you'd apologize even when she disrespected you. But now that you've gone inward, become still, evolved from that reactive man into a grounded, centered force, the script she depended on has shattered, and with it, her certainty. She thought she knew your triggers, your cycles, your weaknesses. She believed that if she said the right things or left at the right time, you'd come chasing, because that's what every other man did. But this time, her old manipulations don't work. You don't flinch, you don't fold, you don't even respond. And that's what shakes her. She can't tell if you're angry, hurt, distracted, or thriving. And that ambiguity is what eats away at her certainty. Because emotional clarity was always her weapon, you showed too much she could calculate. You reacted too fast she could adapt. But now, she has no data. She checks your social media and it's quiet. She sees you in public and your energy has changed. She tries to bait you, maybe a hey text or a memory snap, but you either don't respond or your tone is so unmoved it might as well have been written by a stranger. That's when she spirals. Because the man she left behind is not the man you are now. You're not trying to make her feel anything. You're too focused on making yourself feel everything. You've redirected your emotional currency into your body, your purpose, your mind, your mission. And as she watches that evolution from the outside, she begins to realize she miscalculated. She assumed your attention was free. She assumed your emotions would always be accessible. She assumed your value was based on your availability. But now, she's blocked from the very currency she used to manipulate. And in that space, her confidence evaporates. She finds herself doing things she never did, checking your timestamps, asking friends about you, wondering if you're seeing someone. But the worst part? She's not doing it because she misses love. She's doing it because she's confused. Confused about who you've become. Confused about how you detached without needing validation. Confused about why you look healthier, speak wiser, live quieter. And that confusion starts to transform into admiration. The man she thought was weak now looks dangerous. The man she dismissed now looks disciplined. She starts to remember conversations where you predicted your own growth, where you mentioned your goals, your values, your direction, and she realizes you weren't needy, you were patient, you weren't desperate, you were devoted. And now that your devotion has returned home to you, her ego trembles. She doesn't know how to respond to this version of you. He doesn't need her. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't explain. He simply exists, aligned, stable, and emotionally rich. And that type of man isn't just rare, he's unforgettable. Because he doesn't beg for closure, he doesn't demand recognition. He just becomes so consistent, so composed, so driven, that it forces every woman who ever underestimated him to stop and ask the one question that haunts her most. Was he always this man? Or did I lose him before he became everything I ever wanted? That confusion, that's the real consequence of your emotional transformation. And if you want to hold on to it, then remember this. One of the most powerful Stoic insights is simple. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And that's what you've done. You've embodied the man she never thought you could be. And in doing so, you've become the mystery that keeps her up at night. Not because you said anything, but because everything you used to give is now yours to keep. That's how her confidence dies. not with confrontation, but with the realization that her access to you is no longer based on her choices, but yours. You've become the chooser now, and that's what makes her confused, because she never prepared for the day you would decide, and now you have. Number 3, she realizes you weren't weak. It's when she sees your name come up without feeling control, when she stumbles across your face without the reassurance that she still matters, that something unfamiliar creeps in, because the man she once mocked, pitied, or overlooked has become someone she can no longer categorize, and that challenges the narrative she built to protect her pride. She always told herself that the way you loved her, the way you cared deeply, messaged consistently, and offered loyalty even when she wasn't deserving, was weakness. That you were too emotional, too available, too eager. And now, that same man is gone. Not because someone replaced her, but because you finally replaced your addiction to being chosen with a commitment to choosing yourself. She thought your pain made you desperate, that your presence was driven by need. But now that you're gone, and not hiding, not pretending, but fully embodied in your calmness and purpose, it hits her. She confused strength for weakness. Every man she meets now who ignores her boundaries or overcompensates to win her over just reminds her that what you had was rare. She begins to understand you weren't trying to win her over. You were offering something real, something built, something few men today even understand how to give. But you had to go through the pain of being misunderstood to become the man she now regrets misjudging. Ask yourself, how many times did you get called too much, too intense, too invested, when in truth, you were simply showing up in a world that has trained women to expect effort without reciprocation? That heartbreak you endured wasn't proof that you were unworthy. It was the crucible that hardened your soul into steel. Because strength, real strength, isn't about dominance or arrogance. It's about restraint. It's about building your life so well that others feel the loss of your presence more than they ever appreciated your proximity. That's what she's feeling now. She doesn't just see you glowing, she sees that your glow has nothing to do with her. She realizes the pedestal she thought she stood on was one you built, and now that it's dismantled, she's just another person watching you rise without access to the emotional credit she once freely withdrew from. You stopped begging, you stopped convincing, you stopped explaining who you were, and started becoming it. And now the man who once waited for her texts is now too busy to reply. The man who once checked her story is now writing his own. The man who once asked for a second chance has now outgrown the version of himself who even believed she was necessary for his peace. There's a stoic truth that says, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. And now, your life is a testament to that law. You don't argue with her. You don't try to change her mind. You don't need to prove yourself. You've become proof. The gym, the business, the vision, the spiritual discipline, the masculine restraint. It all becomes a language she now struggles to translate, because she never learned how to love a man who loved himself more than her. And as she watches, confused, humbled, even haunted by who you've become, she begins to grasp that you were never weak. You were in development. Now you are developed. And she missed the final version because she couldn't tolerate the beta test. She left before the update. And now the software doesn't recognize her access code anymore. Number 4, your absence feels heavier than she thought. At first, she thought your distance was temporary, a tactic, a phase, a bluff. She assumed you'd come back with the same old emotional appetite, craving her attention like air. But days passed, then weeks, and something began to settle in her bones. Not fear, but a weight. A strange heaviness that sat in the space you used to occupy in her world. You didn't announce your withdrawal. You didn't ask for her blessing. You just recalibrated your life so thoroughly that she no longer existed in it, and that absence is louder than any words you could have shouted. She expected time to soften you, to drag you back into old habits, to make you crave the closure she denied you. But instead of folding, you flourished. You invested that energy into everything she overlooked. You hit the gym harder. You locked in your focus. You rekindled your friendships. You built a schedule that didn't account for her unpredictability. And the weight she feels isn't regret, it's irrelevance. She doesn't miss you like someone misses an old lover. She misses you like someone misses a key they assumed would always be on the hook. You've removed yourself from her rotation, and now she has to live with the consequences of a reality where her voice no longer echoes in your decisions. That weight she feels, it's not love. It's the realization that your life moves forward with or without her. And if you've ever wondered whether pulling away was the right move, understand this. The man who is missed is the man who rebuilt. The man who stayed in pain is the one who gets forgotten. Because when she senses that her absence didn't break you, but built you, she no longer feels powerful. She feels unnecessary. Picture this. She's sitting with her friends, scrolling through her feed, and stumbles upon a story of you smiling with your boys, hiking, building something, glowing from the inside. She taps your profile and realizes, you're private now. The open book she once skimmed through is now locked, and she doesn't have the password. That's what stings. Not that you're gone, but that you don't need her to know you're gone. Your lack of reaction is not revenge, it's restoration. And in that restoration, her mental framework collapses. She starts reaching for emotional cues she used to rely on. Did he check my post? No. Did he reply to that message I sent 2 weeks ago? No. Is he with someone else? Maybe. But you won't tell her, because you don't have to. Your attention used to orbit her unpredictability, her moods, her availability. But now, it orbits your vision. And nothing is more terrifying to a woman who relied on your obsession than discovering your indifference. She expected you to carry her emotionally long after she dropped the rope. But now she looks back and you're not there. You're too busy living. And this isn't about being cold or calculated. It's about understanding one of the most profound Stoic insights. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. And once you understood that your suffering was a choice and not a sentence, you chose something different. You chose to disappear, not out of hate, but out of hope. Hope for yourself. Hope for a better version. Hope for peace. And that peace is what she feels now, not because she has it, but because she lost it. She no longer gets to interrupt your day with a message, trigger your mood with a post, or shift your plans with a last-minute call. She's a spectator now, watching a man she used to influence become the man she no longer understands. And that absence, that weight, it's the gravitational pull of what she threw away, finally being felt. Not as a punishment, but as a price, one she never expected to pay. And now, even if she reaches out, even if she apologizes, even if she shows up at your door, the question she fears most won't be your anger. It will be your peace. Because if you've truly found it, she knows she's lost the version of you who once believed she was worth the cost of his pain. And that realization, that's the real weight she never saw coming. Number 5. She starts asking questions. It often begins with a glance at an old message, something you sent months ago that she never replied to, and now, without warning, those words linger in her mind longer than she expected, not because she misses you romantically, but because your absence now has a question mark attached, and every moment you remain detached adds weight to that question. It's the kind of unease that doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up when she's walking alone, when the world goes quiet, when no one's watching, and her thoughts are finally allowed to wander toward what she never finished processing. She starts asking herself if she misjudged you, if maybe, just maybe, the man she thought she had outgrown was actually a version she never truly saw. And these questions are not simply about you. They're about her decisions, her perception, her judgment. She replays your arguments, but this time with new eyes, not defensive ones. She reads between the lines of your long messages, the ones she once thought were desperate, and realizes they were layered with emotion she didn't have the maturity to understand. She imagines what it would feel like to be in the same room with you again, but this time without the same power dynamic, because now you aren't seeking anything, and she can feel that. You are no longer orbiting her whims. Your gravitational pull is now your mission, and that's something no one can fake. If you've been working on yourself, if you've been consistent, if your habits now reflect the man you once only dreamed of becoming, then her questions are no longer just reflective, they become painful. She questions her own evolution, wonders if she stalled while you surged forward. These are the types of thoughts that don't fade because they aren't born from emotion, they are born from realization. And this is where the Stoic path shines, because you didn't just react, you redirected. You didn't spiral, you structured. You asked yourself, what is in my control? And you took ownership of every single one of those areas. Your finances, your fitness, your mindset, your spiritual alignment. These became your new language. And in this space, you've become a man of few words and many actions. That contrast now leaves her wondering, was he always this man and I just never noticed? Or did I lose the man he became because I left too early? Either way, the answer never leads back to her power, it leads back to your growth. That's why the questions don't stop. Because every time she thinks she's found closure, she sees another layer of who you've become and realizes she never met this version, and now she probably never will. Number 6. Her comfort dies in your peace. It's not just that she can't reach you, it's that she can no longer interrupt you. She used to send messages whenever she felt unsure, insecure, or even just bored, and she knew you'd answer. Even if it was just a few words, even if it was distant, you were always there, emotionally open. But now, she stares at the same message thread, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure whether sending a message would lead to comfort or confrontation. Because something inside her knows that the man on the other side of that screen no longer needs to reply. Not out of cruelty, but because he no longer sees her as a source of meaning. And this absence of emotional utility, that's where the discomfort lives. She was used to being the one who provided the highs and lows, the drama, the peace, the attention. But now that you've removed your need for that dopamine loop, she feels displaced. Her comfort came from your predictability, not from your presence. She knew how to influence your mood. She knew what to say to spark jealousy. She knew how to ghost you just enough to pull you back. But now, that emotional control panel no longer functions. You've taken back your narrative, and that makes you unreadable. It's that unreadability that unnerves her. She doesn't know how to connect with this version of you because you're not seeking connection. You're building foundation. You've shifted from being emotionally responsive to being internally sovereign. You don't react to emotional bait. You respond to purpose. This is the deepest application of Stoic mastery, not suppressing feelings, but being unmoved by emotional manipulation. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. You've altered your opinion about her role in your life. She's no longer essential, and that demotion, though unspoken, feels louder than any argument. And if she does reach out, she'll find a man who may be polite, even kind, but not accessible, not in the way she remembers. Because you've built something stronger than desire. You've built discipline. You no longer reach for her in moments of stress. You reach for your journal, your goals, your morning run, your prayer, your craft. These are your new emotional rituals. And she doesn't have a place in them. That is what extinguishes her comfort. Because even if you never blocked her, she feels like she's already lost access. Not because you punished her, but because you healed. Number 7. She replays everything differently. Memories are tricky. When we're in control, they serve as validation. When we lose control, they serve as torment. And for her, what once felt like proof of her power now feels like evidence of a mistake. She begins revisiting old conversations, not to reminisce, but to reconsider. She remembers the night you stayed up with her when she was anxious, the morning you skipped the gym to help her with something she forgot, the time you defended her in a room that mocked her ambition. Moments that once felt small to her now appear monumental because she finally understands they weren't typical. She assumed those acts were a given, that any man would do that. But now she sees otherwise. Every new interaction she has with someone else is a comparison she never expected to make. And that comparison isn't about your looks, your income, or your status. It's about your presence, your integrity, your spirit. She remembers the version of you that was available, and it haunts her, not because you were weak, but because she mistook your strength for something expendable. She used to laugh at how serious you were about values, about loyalty, about love. But now those very qualities are what she looks for and can't seem to find. This is the power of transformation. It turns everything old into a new lesson. You've evolved past the identity she built around you, and now she sees the past differently. She doesn't see a clingy man. She sees a committed one. She doesn't see a desperate man. She sees a devoted one. And that reframing doesn't come from your words. It comes from your walk, from your ability to become what you always had the potential to be. This is why you don't need to prove anything, because life has already done that for you. She looks at your journey now with a kind of bittersweet admiration. But admiration from a distance is not the same as presence, and that's what makes it hurt. She replays everything not to return, but because she can't stop wondering who you've become and how she never got to meet that man. The lesson: never let someone's inability to recognize your value define your potential. Let their absence reveal the parts of you they never bothered to explore. And as she replays everything, searching for a different outcome, you've moved on, building new memories with people who recognize your value before it has to be proven. That's how you win. Not by replacing her, but by becoming someone who no longer needs to be remembered by someone who never really saw you. Number 8. She knows she can't reach you anymore. It's not when she realizes you're not replying that the truth hits her hardest. It's when she finally accepts she has no emotional entry point left, no back door into your heart, no leverage to pull you back. And this understanding doesn't strike her with rage. It lands with silence and stillness that echoes louder than confrontation ever could. She used to rely on the predictability of your emotional availability like clockwork. If she left, you'd eventually come knocking. If she gave just enough affection, you'd hold on. If she gave nothing at all, you'd still stay. That access made her feel powerful. But now, every attempt to reconnect dies at the gate. Not because you've built walls, but because you've built yourself. She sees you're no longer where she left you, and more painfully, you're no longer the man who would have once been thrilled to hear from her. She sends a message, short, vague, nostalgic, and you read it, nod, and continue doing your reps. Not because you're trying to act strong, but because your soul has recalibrated what matters. That's what haunts her most. Not the fact that she doesn't hear from you, but that she can feel she's not part of your emotional world anymore. You're not cold, you're calm, you're not playing games, you're playing for legacy. And in that shift, you've become untouchable, not because you're above her, but because you no longer see her as someone who defines your worth. She doesn't just miss your attention, she misses the man she never got to meet, the you that bloomed in her absence, and she knows now that even if she comes back, you won't. Because you've gone somewhere she never had the courage to follow. You went inward. You faced the pain without trying to outsource the healing. You built structure, built habits, built resilience, and you stopped identifying yourself by whether or not you were wanted. That's what makes you powerful now. Your peace isn't dependent on her presence, and that makes it permanent. There's a timeless truth in Stoic philosophy that says, "He who is brave is free." And now you're free. Free from the cycle, free from the loop, free from the inner compulsion to prove your value to someone who needed you broken to feel strong. You've taken the emotional energy you once wasted trying to make her see your worth and invested it into becoming a man whose value is undeniable, even in silence, even in distance, even in mystery. You are no longer accessible, not because you've closed off, but because you've risen too far beyond the version of you she once knew. And the higher you climb, the quieter your past becomes. So now, when she thinks of you, there's no pull she can use, no button to push, no phrase to trigger you back into orbit, just an understanding that the man she once dismissed is now living in dimensions she can't access, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You're gone, not from her contacts, but from her control. And that kind of departure, that's the one they feel forever. You've heard everything you needed to hear, not sugar-coated, not watered down, but the raw truth most men go an entire lifetime without ever receiving. You've felt it, you've lived it, the confusion, the heartbreak, the nights you questioned your worth because someone couldn't see it, the loneliness in a world that tells you to be strong but never teaches you how. You've been ignored, replaced, misunderstood, and made to believe that your emotions are liabilities and your loyalty is weakness. You've given your heart to people who treated it like an option, and every time you tried to rise, it felt like no one handed you the tools. Until now. Because I didn't just create a book. I created the most honest, practical, and transformational relationship blueprint for men ever written, the Stoic Relationship Blueprint. It's dropping in just a few days, not months, not next year, days, and it's not going to be available to everyone. We're capping the number of sales to only a few, because this isn't meant for the masses. This is for the few who are ready to stop bleeding emotionally, rebuild their identity, and finally take back control of their relationships and their peace. And once the cap is hit, it's done. No second run, no re-release, just results. This is your moment, because if you've made it this far, your future is asking you to move, not tomorrow. Now like, comment, and subscribe to this channel if you want more of this truth poured into your life every single week. And if you're truly ready to never beg, chase, or explain your worth again, then comment the blueprint below. Let the world watch you change. Let her watch you evolve, but let you be the reason it happens.